The door to the notary's office was slightly open. Inez paused in the hallway, not entering. Someone was already there. A man she didn't know was standing by the window, speaking softly on the phone. She didn't want to eavesdrop. But then she caught a few words, and her legs froze in place. "She will come," he said. "Yes, it's her. The only one who wasn't given a chance to learn the truth. If she signs, it's all over." A pause. "Then we need to make sure she doesn't sign." Inez pressed the envelope to her chest, the very one that had arrived 2 weeks ago from Edinburgh, from notary Colin McKinley, with an offer to inherit something she didn't even know existed, and slowly stepped back. She had flown to Scotland to meet a grandfather she had never seen, and found herself at the center of a mystery that someone had buried for 40 years. Good day, friends. Please let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe and support the video with a like. This story began with a letter. One letter that arrived on an ordinary Tuesday and turned the life of a woman who thought she had no past upside down. It's a story about a family secret, about 40 years of silence, and how one trip to Edinburgh answered questions that no one dared to ask out loud. Madrid can be different. The touristy side is the Prado, Retiro, the noise of Gran Via, and the smell of churros with hot chocolate at Puerta del Sol. The real Madrid is the quiet neighborhoods of Lavapiés and Malasaña, small bars serving pinchos with a glass of red wine, laundry hanging between balconies, and old women judging the entire neighborhood from plastic chairs at the entrance. Inés Castro lived in the second Madrid for 43 years. She never said, "I am 43," simply because she didn't think of age in numbers. For her, age was something else. How many languages she knew? 5. Spanish, English, French, German, a bit of Portuguese. How many conferences she had translated? More than 800. How many years ago Marcos left? 9. And she stopped counting. Numbers that meant something. 166 centimeters tall. Chestnut hair with gray that she didn't dye. Not because she didn't notice, but because she didn't consider it important. Brown eyes. Deep. Professional. A simultaneous interpreter trains herself not to show emotions on her face while working, and this gradually becomes a habit even outside the booth. Her hands, nervous, quick, with slender fingers that were always doing something, flipping through the pages of a dictionary, drumming on the table, twirling a pencil. She lived in an apartment on Cabeza Street, in Lavapiés. 112 square meters, 3 rooms, 3-meter ceilings, thick walls of an old building that kept it cool in the summer. The rent was 1,200 euros. Expensive for this neighborhood, but she had been renting it for 17 years, and the landlord hadn't raised the price. It was her apartment, even if it wasn't really hers. Her work was freelance, simultaneous interpreting for international organizations, the European Parliament, the UN headquarters in Geneva, medical conferences, court trials, high-level business meetings. Her income was unstable. A good year brought in 40 to 45,000 euros. A bad year, 28. For the past 2 years, it had consistently been 36. Inez had found her niche: medical congresses, English and German, specializing in cardiology and oncology. A bit dull, but steady. Marcos was an architect. They had lived together for 12 years, married after 3, divorced, without children, and without much scandal. It just became clear that they were living in the same apartment and speaking politely, but each was living their own life. Marcos moved to Valencia. Inés stayed in Lavapiés. They occasionally exchanged messages, friendly, without pain. After the divorce, Inés hardly worked for a year. She took on minimal assignments, read a lot, and visited exhibitions at the Prado. Not depression, no, just a pause, a reset. Then she returned to work with renewed vigor, as if a year of rest had recharged what had drained over 12 years of marriage. Her family was small. Her mother, Consuelo Castro, 71 years old, lived in Seville, had worked as a primary school teacher for 38 years, and was now retired, tending to her garden. Inés never knew her father. He left when Inés was 2. Her mother never spoke of him, and at some point, Inés stopped asking. That was a mistake. It became clear later. The letter arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, January 16th. Inés noticed it among advertisements and receipts. A thick, cream-colored envelope, without a company logo, just a return address. McKinley & Partners, Notaries, North Edinburgh, 41 Queen Street. British stamps. Her name was handwritten in neat script. Inés Castro Flores, Cabeza Street, 28, 4th floor, right apartment, Madrid. She put the kettle on. She sliced open the envelope with a letter opener. Inside were 3 sheets. The first was an official letter in 2 languages, Spanish and English. Dear Miss Castro Flores, Inés read, and the tea had brewed and cooled slightly by the time she reached the end. We regret to inform you of the death of William James Campbell, who passed away on December 29, 2024, at the age of 81. Mr. Campbell left a will in which you are named as one of the heirs to his estate. According to the terms of the will, your share of the inheritance will be transferred to you upon the fulfillment of certain conditions. To review the full text of the will and discuss the details, please contact our office or visit in person. Enclosed is a brief, private message left for you by Mr. Campbell. The second sheet was this message, handwritten in a shaky but legible script. Inés, you do not know me. I am your grandfather, your father's father. I know this sounds strange after 40 years. I regret not writing sooner. I had many reasons for not doing so, and all of them turned out to be wrong. I want you to come to Edinburgh, not for the money, although there is some, and part of it is rightfully yours. For the truth. You need to know who you are, where you come from, what happened 40 years ago. My notary, Colin McKinley, knows everything you need to know. Trust him. Only him. William Campbell. The third sheet was a summary of the conditions of the will. Inés read it 3 times before she believed she understood it correctly. William Campbell left her and 2 other heirs, their names were not mentioned, the right to inherit. Her share amounted to a significant sum. The exact figure would be disclosed by the notary in person. There was one condition. Inés had to come to Edinburgh in person, meet with notary McKinley, and hear the full story. If she chose to decline the inheritance afterward, that was her right. If she accepted, she would need to sign the documents. The deadline was February 1st. Inés drank her tea. It was already cold. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at Cabeza Street. The old woman from the 3rd floor had already taken her plastic chair. 2 boys were kicking a ball around. The father of your father. The father she never knew. She called her mother that same evening. There was a long silence on the line after Inez read the letter aloud. "Mom." "Yes?" "Did you know about him?" Another pause. Long. "I heard that name. A long time ago." "And?" "Inez, that's the past. Why are you going there?" "Because I want to know." "Would you want to know who you are?" "I know who I am," Consuelo said, firmly, but something in her voice trembled. "Mom, tell me about my father." Silence. "His name was Emilio Castro," Consuelo finally said. "We met in Barcelona in '81. He was handsome, smart, half Spanish, half something else. I never knew for sure. He said his family was from Scotland, that he grew up here, that he didn't talk to them. I asked once. He said something happened between them and that it didn't matter. I believed him. We got married. 2 years later, you were born. A year after you, he left. Just left. One morning he was gone. He left a note. 'I'm sorry. This is better.' I never saw him again." "Is he alive?" "I don't know. Inez, that was 40 years ago." "He could be alive, Mom. How old would he be now? 60? 63. I counted sometimes." Pause. "Mom, the will says this inheritance is rightfully mine." "That means Grandpa knew about me. That means he was watching over us. Or at least knew that I existed. All this time." "Inez." "I'm going, Mom. I need to know." Inez booked a flight for next week. Madrid to Edinburgh, direct flight with Vueling, 2 hours and 10 minutes. She wrote to Notary McKinley, briefly in English, that she would arrive on January 24th. McKinley replied the same day. "Thank you. I will be waiting for you in our office at 10 in the morning. Please bring identification documents." A week before her departure, Inez worked as usual. A cardiology conference in Geneva, 2 days. She returned, packed her suitcase, and called her friend Claudia to share the news. Claudia listened, asked questions, and finally said, "Inez, do you realize this could be anything? A scam? Some kind of scheme?" "The notary is real. I checked the license on the Scottish Bar Association's website. The address is legitimate." "Grandpa died. There's an obituary in the Scottish news." "You found the obituary?" "Yes. William James Campbell, 81 years old, passed away on December 29th after a long illness. He was the owner of the whiskey company, Campbell & Son, founded in 1962. He left 2 sons, Robert and—" She paused. "Robert and Emilio." "Emilio," Claudia repeated. "That's my father's name." Edinburgh greeted her with rain. It was expected. Inez had been to Scotland once for a lawyers' conference in Glasgow and remembered it as endlessly damp yet beautiful. Edinburgh turned out to be different. Not industrial like Glasgow, but stone and solemn, with Gothic spires on the horizon and a castle looming over the city from a basalt cliff. She settled into a small hotel, the Carlton Lodge on Carlton Hill, a 3-star, quiet place with a view of the Firth of Forth from the window. £68 a night. Not luxurious, but clean and cozy. Tartan carpets, a fireplace in the living room, breakfast included. The office of McKinley & Partners on Queen Street was exactly what a Scottish notary office should be. Dark oak panels, high ceilings, portraits of people in black robes on the walls, the smell of old paper and wax. The secretary, an elderly woman in glasses, asked her to wait and brought coffee without being asked. Inez waited. About 3 minutes. And it was then she went to the restroom, asked the secretary for directions, and on her way back, passed by a slightly open door of an office, and she heard. "She will come. If she signs, it's all over. We need to make sure she doesn't sign." Inez stood in the corridor. She pressed the envelope to her chest. Her heart was beating uncomfortably, fast and heavy, like when a person suddenly realizes they are in a situation whose rules they do not know. The man behind the door fell silent. He put away his phone, turned around, and saw her. He was a man about 55, tall, dark-haired, with sharp features, dressed in a nice suit. He looked at her for a few seconds. Then he said in English, completely calmly, "You must be Inez." "Yes," she said. "I'm Robert Campbell," he said, "your uncle." A pause that held a lot. "I heard what you said," Inez said. She spoke in English too, evenly. Robert did not look away. "I know." "You said that if I sign, it will all be lost." "Yes." "Why?" Robert Campbell was silent for a few seconds. Then he sighed and stepped away from the window. He sat in a chair, not at the desk, but in a simple leather one that was off to the side. "Because it's true," he said. "If you sign the documents and accept the inheritance, the company will be divided. My father left you a share that technically allows you to block a number of board decisions. And I don't want that." "Why?" "Because I've spent 40 years building this company, and I don't want a stranger to have power over it." A pause. "It's rude. I know it's rude, but it's the truth." Inez looked at him. In her mind, at the same time, the part that had spent 40 years translating words from one language to another was working and had learned to notice discrepancies. "You said that I'm a stranger who has power over it, but I am your niece, your brother's daughter." Robert looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he finally said. "That's true, too." Colin McKinley, the notary, entered the office at that moment. A small man, about 65, with the manners of someone who has spent his life delicately resolving awkward situations. "Robert," he said, "I asked you to wait in another room." "I know," Robert said, "but Inez heard what I said. It's better this way. More honest." McKinley looked at Inez. She nodded. "Then," the notary said, "perhaps we should all sit together and properly talk." They sat at a large table in the conference room, Inez on one side, Robert on the other, McKinley at the head. Folders appeared on the table. McKinley opened the first one. "Before we talk about the inheritance," he said, "I want to tell you a story, because this is the main part of what your grandfather wanted you to know." He looked at Inez. "The story of your family." William James Campbell was born in Edinburgh in 1943 into a poor working-class family. His father worked at a shipyard, and his mother was a laundress. William was a bright boy and received a scholarship to the University of Edinburgh, engineering faculty. In '62, right after graduation, he founded a small whiskey production, not in the Highlands, but in Edinburgh itself, which was unusual. He named it Campbell and Son, although he didn't have a son at that time. 5 years later, the first son, Robert. 8 years later, the second son, Emilio. The name Emilio was not chosen by chance. The boy's mother, William's wife, Margaret, was half Spanish. Her mother came from Barcelona. Emilio was the name of her grandfather. Margaret died when Emilio was 14. Cancer. William raised the boys alone. Robert was the elder, practical, and had worked in the company since he was 18, learning the production inside and out. Emilio was the younger, restless, talented, and couldn't sit still. At 20, he left for Spain. At first, he said it would be for 6 months. Then, he stayed. He wrote to his father that he had fallen in love. Later, he wrote that he had gotten married. William came to Barcelona once, met Consuelo. He approved. He wrote to his son, "Come back, the company is yours too." Emilio replied, "Soon." Soon stretched into 3 years. Then Emilio called his father from Madrid and said, "Dad, I'm not coming back. Consuelo and I are better here. We have a daughter. Her name is Inés." William was silent. Then he said, "How can you abandon the family business?" Emilio replied, "That's your business, Dad, not mine." The conversation ended, as conversations do when both sides are convinced of their own righteousness, with a door slam. More precisely, with a dial tone. After that call, they didn't speak for 20 years. At this point in the story, Robert was looking away, out the window. Inés noticed that his hands were clenching on the table. "What happened next?" she asked McKinley. "Emilio left Consuelo when you were 3 years old." McKinley opened another folder. "We don't know exactly why. There are theories." He looked at Robert. "He was in love with another," Robert said briefly. "A woman in Barcelona. He went to her." Inés didn't move. "Did you know about this?" "Father found out. He hired a detective. He knew how to do things like that when he wanted. He discovered that Emilio lived sometimes in Barcelona, sometimes in Marseille, that he had another woman, that he never officially divorced your mother, he just disappeared." Robert paused. Father was furious. He wrote Emilio a letter, just one. He said, "You abandoned your wife and daughter. There's no place for you in my company and in my life." Emilio didn't respond. "What happened to Emilio?" McKinley opened the third folder. He pulled out a sheet of paper. "Emilio Castro Campbell passed away in 2003 in Marseille. Heart attack. He was 42. Inés looked at the sheet. 42. When she thought of that number, she thought of age. 42 was when her left knee hurt after long flights. 42 was when she first realized she had started to appreciate silence a little. 42 was the age at which her father, whom she hadn't seen since she was 3, had died. "Did he know about me?" she asked. "When he died, did he know I existed?" "Yes," McKinley said. "Documents were found among his belongings. Among them was your photograph, a childhood one. Consuelo sent it to him a long time ago. He kept it." Inés looked down at the table. "And grandfather?" she finally asked. "Did he know from the very beginning?" Yes, William knew about you. When he found out that Emilio had died, he tried to reach out for the first time. He found your address in Madrid. He wrote a letter. It was returned. You had moved by that time.
We moved 3 times in 10 years,
Inez mumbled.
Marcos, we changed apartments.
William tried to find you again in 2015. He found you through professional resources, you as a translator. He wrote again. You didn't respond.
I didn't receive it,
Inez remembered.
In 2015, I changed my main email. I switched from one provider to another. It could have gotten lost.
He didn't know that. He thought you didn't want to make contact. He waited. McKinley put away the folder. When he was diagnosed last year, he decided not to wait any longer. He wrote this letter, the last one. Robert stood up. He walked to the window. I didn't know about you for 20 years, he said, not turning around. Father told me that Emilio had a daughter, only in '98. I was angry at Emilio, at Father for hiding it. I thought, another problem. Pause. That was wrong. You're afraid I'll take part of the company, Inez said. Yes. Honestly, yes. Why? I'm a translator. I don't understand anything about whiskey production. Robert turned around. It's not about you taking over. It's about the fact that with your share, 25% of the voting stock, you can block a deal I've been preparing for 3 years. Watch deal. Robert was silent. The sale of the company, he finally said. A Japanese holding, Suntory. They want to buy Campbell & Son outright. A good price, a very good one. How much? 47 million pounds. Inez exhaled slowly. And my share is 25%. 11.5 million pounds for you personally, if you vote for. If against, the deal is blocked. Why did grandfather leave me exactly 25%? McKinley replied. Because that was Emilio's share. William divided the company equally between the sons back in '95, 50% each. When Emilio died in 2003, his share formally passed to William. William left half of it to Robert and half to you, by will. So now Robert has 75% and I have 25%. Exactly. And to sell the company, the consent of all shareholders with more than 20% is needed. Exactly, McKinley said again. Your grandfather was a lawyer by education before he became an entrepreneur. He understood everything. Inez was thinking. 40 years of silence. A grandfather who knew about her and was afraid to approach. A father who left and took her childhood photograph with him. An uncle who built the company for 3 years for the deal and now looks in horror at his niece from Madrid. 47 million pounds. 11.5. Her share. I need time, she said. Until tomorrow. Of course, McKinley said. Robert nodded. Something changed in his face. Not relaxed, no. Something shifted. As if he expected something different. That she would immediately say yes or no. And he didn't expect her to simply ask for time. Can I see the place where the whiskey is produced? Inez asked. Robert was surprised. It was evident. Why? I want to understand what exactly I'm getting, or what I'm giving up. The production of Campbell & Son was not in the center of Edinburgh, but 30 kilometers to the west, in a small town called Linlithgow, near an old lake and the ruins of a castle where Mary Stuart was born. Robert drove Inez in his Land Rover, silently for almost the entire way. She looked out the window. Bare trees, gray fields, sparse farms. The road passed through villages with names she read slowly. Winchborough, Bridgend, Linlithgow Bridge. She thought, this is where she's from. Half of her. From these gray fields and stone walls, from this quiet Scottish November. Have you been to Scotland before? Robert asked as they entered Linlithgow.
Once, in Glasgow, at a lawyers' conference. I was translating.
Linlithgow is different. Quiet.
Yes, beautiful.
He glanced at her briefly. Why are you interested in the factory? You're a translator, not a businessman.
Because I want to understand what exactly I'm inheriting, or what I'm giving up.
Pause. Would you want to sign a contract without seeing what it's about? Robert didn't respond, but he understood something. Inez felt it in the way his shoulders shifted slightly.
You're like your father,
he said unexpectedly as they entered the production area.
Like whom?
Like Emilio. The same cheekbones. And the way you're silent. He used to be silent like that, too. Inez didn't reply. The production was small, not an industrial giant, but what is called a small distillery. A few copper stills, the characteristic smells of barley and peat, wooden barrels in long, low warehouses. The workers, about 20 of them, greeted Robert by name. How many people work here? Inez asked. 23 in production, 11 more in the office, plus distribution, which is external contractors. Do they know about the sale? Pause. No, Robert said. Will Suntory keep them all? Not guaranteed. He paused. They will optimize production. Most likely, half will be moved to Japan under management. So, about 20 people will lose their jobs. Robert didn't answer. How long have these people been working here? Varies. Thomas, that one by the big still, has been here for 28 years.
Since 1996.
About that. Inez walked through the warehouses, looking at the barrels. Each one had letters and numbers written in chalk, indicating the year and type. Some were very old, 1988, 1992. The whiskey inside these barrels had been aging while Inez was growing up in Madrid, unaware of her Scottish grandfather. At the end of the warehouse was a separate barrel, small, unlike the others. It had a brass plate instead of chalk. Inez stepped closer. For Inez, someday. The date on the plate was 2004, the year after Emilio's death. Inez stood in front of this barrel, staring at it for a long time. Robert was nearby, silently. He did this in the year after Emilio's death, Robert said. I didn't know about this barrel until the notary opened the property list for me.
What's inside it?
20-year-old single malt whiskey, of exceptional quality, I checked. 2005 by our classification. Right now, it's worth... He paused. Right now, it's worth a lot. Inez placed her hand on the barrel. The wood was dry, warm. It had absorbed the warmth of the warehouse air. Her grandfather made this barrel of whiskey in 2004, when Inez was 23. When she was just starting her career as a translator, working at a tiny company in Madrid for 800 euros a month, thinking it would be good if by the age of 30 she could afford a decent apartment. At that time, her grandfather in Scotland was writing her name on a small brass plate. In the evening, Inez sat in her room at the Carlton Lodge Hotel, drinking tea. Outside, the rain drizzled, quiet, Scottish, without wind. The Firth of Forth was dark, almost black. She wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about Thomas, who had worked in the warehouse for 28 years and who probably didn't know that his job depended on what an unfamiliar Spanish translator would decide. She thought about Robert. He wasn't a villain. He was a man who had built the company his whole life and was afraid of losing it. That was understandable. It even sparked something resembling respect, despite the roughness of that phone phrase. She thought about her grandfather, who wrote, "For Inez," on the whiskey barrel in the year of his son's death, who was afraid to write to her, and only did so at the very end. She thought about her mother, Consuelo, who raised her alone for 40 years and never spoke about what it was like to be abandoned. She thought about Emilio, a father she never knew, who kept her childhood photograph. In the morning, she called Robert. "I want to meet with you again. Without the notary. Just to talk." Pause. "Okay," Robert said. They met at the Elephant House Cafe on George Bridge Street, the very place where J.K. Rowling once wrote the first Harry Potter. A tourist spot, but quiet on a Friday morning. Robert ordered coffee. Inez, tea. "I won't sign the consent for the sale," she said. Robert closed his eyes for a second. "But I won't vote against it either," she continued. "For now." He opened his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want a different conversation, not about whether to sell or not, but about what will happen to the people who work there." "Inez." 23 people in production. You said Suntory is optimizing. How many will be left?" Robert was silent. "Robert, I didn't come to take your company. I came because my grandfather wrote a letter. Because I've spent my whole life not knowing who my father is and where I come from. That's more important than money." "You would give up 11 million pounds because that's more important than money?" "I haven't said anything about giving up yet. I'm talking about something else. If you sell, I want a clause in the contract about job guarantees. Not best efforts, but specific obligations. A minimum of 3 years for all current employees." Robert was looking at her. "Suntory won't agree to such a condition. Then find another buyer. Or don't sell." "Inez, it's not that simple." "I know." She picked up her cup. "I have a proposal. Listen, I'll take my share, 25%. I won't sell it to Suntory. I'll remain a shareholder. With me, you can't proceed with the sale without my consent, which means you have to negotiate. That gives me leverage. That gives you a reason to talk to Suntory about a different contract." "You want to use my leverage against me?" "I want to use it together with you. Those are two different things." Pause. "Robert, we've never met before yesterday. I have no idea what it's like to build a company for 40 years. You have no idea what it's like to spend your whole life not knowing who your father is. We both lost something that grandfather could have given us, but didn't in time. Maybe we both have the right to fix something." Robert looked at her for a long time. Outside the cafe, George Bridge Street, tourists with umbrellas, the rain had almost passed. "You're just like your father," he finally said. "Emilio always did that. He would come with a proposal that sounded unbeneficial, and then it turned out he was right." "Tell me about him," Inez said. For the first time in 2 days, Robert allowed himself to relax a bit. He dropped his shoulders. He took his coffee. He was unbearable, he said. Always late. Forgot people's names. Lost his car keys every day. Pause. But when he laughed, it made everything feel lighter. Even if you were angry, it just physically felt lighter. Inez listened. He could find the good in any situation. Not in the sense of, let's be positive. I mean, he really found it. Something specific. Robert looked into his cup. Father didn't like that. Father thought Emilio didn't take anything seriously. But Emilio just saw seriousness differently. I'm completely different, Inez said. No. You just proposed a scheme that I couldn't come up with in 3 years, and you did it in 15 minutes. That's his. They sat in the cafe for another hour. Robert talked about his childhood in Edinburgh, about teenage Emilio, who once rode the entire London Underground in 1 day just for a bet, and returned as happy as if he had won the Olympics. About Father William, strict, fair. McKinley has letters, Robert said at one point. What letters? Father wrote, for the last 20 years, every evening. One to Emilio. He wrote his whole life, but never sent it. Pause. One to you, also never sent. McKinley said Father wanted you to receive them personally, after our conversation. Inez set down her cup. Let's go, she said. McKinley was waiting for them in the office, without surprise, as if he knew they would come together. He took a thick envelope from the safe with several sheets inside. This is everything he wrote in the last 6 months, the notary said, when he knew the end was near. He tried to summarize. Inez took the envelope. She sat in a chair by the window. Robert stood by the wall, arms crossed, not leaving, but not interfering either. She read for a long time. Her grandfather's handwriting, neat at first, trembling by the end, filled the pages. It was not just a letter. It was an explanation. An explanation of his whole life. Why he fell out with Emilio. Why he didn't search for Inez earlier. Why he remained silent for 40 years. He wrote honestly, without self-justifications, although attempts were evident in some paragraphs which he crossed out himself. He wrote, I was wrong. I thought that the family business was the main thing I could give my sons. I didn't understand that some people don't need what you want to give them. Emilio wanted something else. I didn't listen. He wrote about Inez. I saw you in a photograph, a little girl with dark hair and Campbell cheekbones. I thought about you often. I did nothing, and that's my fault, not anyone else's. He wrote at the end, I'm not asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness is your choice, not my request. I just want you to know, you are part of this family. You have been part of it from day one. It's just that no one told you in time. Inez finished reading. She folded the sheets back. Outside the window, McKinley. Queen Street, Edinburgh, November. Passers-by with umbrellas. The wet cobblestone sidewalk. Did you read this? She asked Robert. No, it's yours. He writes that he was wrong. Robert was silent. He told me that, the last year, several times, out loud. It was hard for him. He wasn't used to talking about such things out loud. But he did. Yes. Inez put the envelope in her bag.
"Okay," she said. "Let's get to work."
Negotiations with Santori took 8 months. Inez accepted the inheritance, all 25% of the shares in Campbell & Son. She signed the documents with McKinley the same day. A barrel of 20-year-old whiskey with a brass plaque reading, "For Inez," was officially handed over to her. She requested to keep it in the warehouse in Linlithgow, under Thomas's supervision. Thomas, upon hearing the story, was silent for a moment, then said, "The old man always said that Emilio had a daughter. We thought he was making it up." Robert and Inez hired a lawyer, a specialist in international M&A transactions, who helped formulate the terms. Santori acquires 60% of the company, while the remaining 40% stays with Robert and Inez. Santori gains rights to the brand and distribution. Production in Linlithgow remains fully intact, and employment contracts are guaranteed for 5 years. The deal price was reduced to $32 million, but Santori agreed because they needed the Edinburgh brand, not production optimization. Inez's share in the new structure is 20%. The cash portion of the deal for her share is £6.5 million. Inez returned to Madrid in August, to the apartment on Cabeza Street in Lavapiés. The old woman from the 3rd floor was sitting on a plastic chair. 2 boys were kicking the same ball, or another one that looked similar. Inez set down her suitcase. She walked to the kitchen, made coffee, automatically, without thinking, as she had done 1,000 times. She drank it while standing by the window. Then she picked up the phone.
"Mom, tell me about him. About Dad. Everything you remember. I want to know."
A long silence.
"It hurts,"
Consuelo said.
"I know, but I'm listening."
They talked for 4 hours. Inez sat on the kitchen floor. She started on a chair, then slid down, as often happened during long conversations, and listened as her mother recounted stories of Barcelona in '81, of a young man with a name that didn't quite fit Spain, of how they danced at a party in an apartment on Gracia, and how he laughed so that everyone turned to look.
"He was very alive,"
Consuelo said.
"Do you understand? There are people with whom you feel that everything is real, that there's nothing superfluous. He was like that. And then he left."
Silence. "Then he left, yes." A pause. "Inez, I was angry at him for 40 years. Is that normal, really?"
"It's normal, Mom."
"But I don't want you to be angry. You didn't know him. You're not to blame for not knowing. And he wasn't a bad person. He was a person who didn't know how to stay. That's not the same thing." A week later, Inez flew to Seville, for the first time in 5 years. Her mother met her at the gate, thinner, tanned, in gardening gloves.
"My jasmine is blooming right now,"
she said instead of a greeting.
"I see,"
Inez said.
"Beautiful."
They hugged, briefly. Consuelo wasn't one to linger in hugs, but tightly. They sat in the garden for 2 days. They ate lemons with salt, just like in childhood, drank coffee, and went to the market. Consuelo talked about Emilio, a funny, inconsistent, lively man who laughed in a way that made everything feel lighter. She recounted how he cooked, poorly, but with joy. How he once burned an omelet and treated the neighbors to it, claiming it was a special recipe. How he brought flowers, not on holidays, but just because, whenever he saw something bright at the market.
"He loved you,"
Consuelo said one evening, as they sat in the dark listening to the cicadas.
"I'm sure of it. He just didn't know how to be where he needed to be."
"Did you forgive him?" A long pause.
"I stopped being angry,"
the mother said. "That's not the same as forgiving, but it's enough." In September, Inez went to Marseille. She found the cemetery through the city registry, Cimetière Saint-Pierre, in the north of the city. She didn't find the grave right away. She had to ask the caretaker, who checked the registry and guided her. A small stone. Emilio Castro Campbell, 1961 to 2003. Just a name and dates, nothing more. No words about who he was. The grave was well kept. Someone had brought flowers, though it was very recent. A small bouquet of white and yellow chrysanthemums. Who? That woman? Inez didn't know. She didn't want to know right now. She stood there. She didn't say anything. Just stood in the warm autumn Marseille sun, which felt warm despite it being September, and looked at the stone. Then she left. On the train back from Marseille to Madrid via Barcelona, 6 hours, she remembered that it was in this direction, from Madrid to Barcelona, that Emilio had once traveled. He had left, and she was going the other way. It wasn't a symbol, just a thought, but she remembered it. The money, which she received for her share in the deal, was enough for her not to work for 10 years. Inez continued to work, not because she needed the money, just simultaneous translation was her thing. She understood that now more clearly than before. The ability to hear 2 languages at once and not get confused. The ability to be a bridge, to convey words accurately, without loss, without additions, exactly what was said. That was hers. She gave part of the money to her mother, so Consuelo could stop worrying about retirement and just tend to the garden. Part, she invested in a small fund to support freelance translators. Their profession was invisible, and the market was harsh. Once a year, she goes to Linlithgow, checks the barrel. Thomas greets her, reservedly, in a Scottish way, and they drink tea in a small room by the warehouse, and he tells her about William, piece by piece. Every year, a little. Robert, they didn't become close. But when he is in Madrid for business, he calls. Sometimes they have dinner at some place in Lavapiés that Inez chooses because she knows the neighborhood. Robert grimaces at the noise and crowd every time, and each time he says, "I see why you live here." He tells stories about Emilio, funny, sometimes hurtful, always lively. Inez listens and thinks, there he is, her father. Not the one she didn't know, but the one she recognizes in pieces through other people's memories, slowly. That's enough. Psychologists and sociologists studying the phenomenon of late family reunification note that in Europe, thousands of cases occur each year where adults discover the existence of previously unknown relatives through wills, genealogical databases, or chance encounters. According to a study conducted by Leiden University in 2022, about 67% of such reunifications, when they happen in adulthood, lead to significant long-term changes in a person's self-perception, even if the contact with relatives remains limited. Researchers explain this phenomenon as narrative identity. It is important for a person to understand their family history not as a set of facts, but as a coherent story in which they are not an isolated point emerging from nowhere, but part of a long chain of people, decisions, and consequences. Knowing this chain, even if it consists of mistakes and silence, provides a special sense of calm. Not happiness, just calm. A place. Dear friends, if this story touched you, please share in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Give a like if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell to not miss new stories. Take care of yourself and those around you. See you soon.